Arguably one of America's most important playwrights. I mean, he's won a Pulitzer Prize, and he's the author of many books, and his latest is The Secret Knowledge. He's inspired generations of playwrights, screenwriters, film producers. He himself was once, I guess you would consider, a liberal until he started to take the time to read the works of F.A. Hayek and Thomas Sowell and Milton Friedman, and he's joining us here tonight. Thank you for joining us, David.
Oh, you're welcome. Good to be here.
It's funny that when I was thinking about who I wanted on tonight's program, as Occupy is heating up, I got to interview you when The Secret Knowledge first came out, and you wrote an amazing chapter on what you called adventure slumming. And
yeah,
it basically was about people like Abby Hoffman and Jane Fonda and all these people that started to glom on to all these things and take to the streets and get theatrical. But in the end, they really weren't offering any solutions, any answers to questions.
Well, that's true. What they were doing is feeling good about themselves and feeling empowered to recognize that there's such a thing as injustice in the world and there's such a thing as inequality in the world, and to take this as a means of pinning a label on themselves or giving themselves an award.
When you see the Occupy people, do you think to yourself, man, you really need to grow up here? I mean, you have no idea what you're talking about. There's a lot more to learn in life. This thing that you're doing, it's not going to get you anywhere.
Well, here's what I think. I'll tell you what, is that totalitarian is that if people of my generation, I'm 64, I was born after World War II, we look back and we say, how did you guys let it happen? How did Western Europe let it happen? How did you let it devolve into totalitarianism? The answer is little by little and piece by piece. So one piece of totalitarianism is this vague social vision which inspires everyone. Do you want to help the poor or not? Okay, well, there's always been poor. The Bible tells us the poor will always be with us. One nice thing about America is that the poor aren't always the same people. So now we see an incipient totalitarian movement in this country wants to help the poor. It also has an element of racialism in it, that black people, according to Mr. Obama and his supporters, are immune from criticism, and anyone who criticizes any of Obama's supposed programs is accused of being a racist, a homophobe, or an anti-feminist, or an anti-Islamist. Another aspect of totalitarian movements is licensing illegal behavior. So whether it's the brown shirts breaking windows in Kristallnacht in 1933, or the Occupy movement setting bombs in Seattle and breaking windows in Seattle, once you say there's a class of behavior which is absolutely illegal, but we are not going to enforce the laws against that behavior because these people have a moral right to act out, what you end up with is that a bunch of good-meaning idiots like the Occupy movement, eventually, if you look at PETA, standing for animals, there's also an acting out version of the fascists who are burning down shelters and threatening people to do vivisection. The Sierra Club, supposedly saving trees, there's also a fascist aspect of the far right aspect of the Sierra Club that's blowing up tuna boats. People who are against abortion, killing abortion doctors, it's the same thing. And the Occupy movement, once you say they aren't a bunch of thugs who shouldn't have a permit to march and they should be thrown in jail, you say, well, they have a higher social good. The society starts to crumple because we don't know what norms to enforce anymore. Once you give up the law, and once you give up the culture which gave rise to the law, the question is, what do I do now? Who can judge? And the answer is, well, we'd better judge according to the standards that were given us in the Constitution, because our country is going down the drain.
I have to ask you, when I just assumed, knowing how important your work is, whether it's on the stage or in cinema, that maybe you just worked so hard on your career and never politically identified yourself, but you write in the book how you discovered Hayek and you discovered these free market writers. And I mean, your book in of itself, your writing style is amazing, and you seem to name the authors that those of us that read deeply also admire. When did you say to yourself, you know, I'm going to take some time out from maybe writing the next hit Broadway play or great movie and just start to sort of self-teach myself this stuff? When did it happen?
Well, a few years ago, I was very upset by the writers' strike. The Writers Guild, of which I'm a member, went on strike. I was doing a television show called The Unit, and there was a bunch of writers over there. Everybody in the Writers Guild decided to go out on strike. So these people who were employed, doing a very good job and being very, very well paid for it, decide to go out on strike for some sort of future benefits which might or might not accrue in future media. So in doing that, they voted themselves out of a job, which was their right. They also voted out of a job every other last person who was not a member of that union and who worked on the shows. All of the drivers and all of the cooks and all of the makeup people and people who worked 18 hours a day and lived from paycheck to paycheck, who had no upside. The writers felt empowered to vote them out of a job, because they thought because they owed it to some idea of the working man, which was another idea of adventure slumming, because they might have been a working man 40, 50, 100 years ago, but they ain't the working man now. They call themselves producers. That really shook me to the ground. So I started, as I slowed down in my work, trying to examine the moral principles by which I lived, and ask myself the question of Rabbi Hillel is, what is hateful to me? Do I want to do it to my neighbor? And that's when I started investigating conservatism. And
you told me, you told me on the radio that you're so proud of your daughter because she's following your footsteps, but she's got a real paid job, and you and her talk about paychecks and taxes and all this other stuff. That sounds like you're really imparting this stuff on your children.
Well, I'm trying. I've been teaching kids for about 40 years all over, and I've always been fascinated by the matriculation age between 17 and 21, 17 and 22, the age at which they go to college. Because what I see is that's the last time that one can, with any hope of success, steer a child on the right way. If they don't matriculate at that time, they're stuck for the rest of their lives. So if they've been raised in the bubble, especially in the liberal bubble, and never had to work and never had to think about where the money comes from, never had to think about what taxes are and what patriotism is, what religion is, what morality is, and what culture is, and haven't been given something to help them be proud of themselves, they are grist for the mill of these liberal universities that are filling their head with filth. And I'm speaking as a guy who was taught at Yale, at Harvard, the University of Chicago, and at Brown and various other institutions. The liberal arts colleges are filling these kids with anti-Semitic, unpatriotic filth. How in the world will they get that out of their head if they've spent their lives trying to get into these colleges? They succeed, and the guy says, here's a ticket, you're in. If you can tell me these 5 phrases for the rest of your life, you need never think again.
Now, let me ask you,
it's a damn shame.
George Clooney, other people in the industry are openly throwing fundraisers for Barack Obama. Nobody's saying, hey, maybe some of you guys ought to keep your opinions to yourself, just sell the tickets to the movies or the plays or the CDs and the downloads. Is anyone saying, hey, Mamet, stay out of this, okay? This is not your area. Don't do this. We don't need any potential Romney supporters in the club here. Are you getting any flack for your politics?
Well, I don't know if I'm in the club. I go to work, I come home, I spend time with my family. I go to work, I come home, I spend time to my family. That's the way I'm privileged to live my life. But here's the question: if the houses of Congress have failed, which they did before the conservative takeover, if the presidency has failed, which failed in a disastrous way, if the Supreme Court's always up for grabs, then if the press, which is supposed to protect our freedoms, has become sycophants and suborned and cannot be trusted to report the facts, let alone to keep from giving us their opinions, who is to be trusted? And the answer is the American citizen, because that's what the Constitution says. It's our country. It's not the government's country. It's the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So George Clooney, God bless him, and I, and you, we're the people. We got a right to speak up. It's our government. We pay these people.
Well, I got to say that the Secret Knowledge is a great book, and I'm glad that you are unafraid to say what you're saying. I'm glad to know that you are capable of producing amazing work. And I'm not just saying this because you're on the program. You invited me to come see your play Race, and I was absolutely blown away by it. It seems like the world needs a little bit more balance in the entertainment industry, and you're kind of an artist's artist. I think when artists think, like, you know, who are the guys that really write those great scripts that are going to live, you know, past our generation and into the future, I think you're one of those guys. I just hope that you can inspire people in the industry, whether you're in the club or not, the way you've inspired people with your career, with your success, with your works.
Thank you very much. I sure appreciate it. You know what's helped inspire me is my rabbi is a great rabbi and studying Judaism and reading the Torah. And as you read the Torah, you find out Moses was in exactly the same place as Jesus. Both of them said, you know what, I'd rather not go. God, good idea. Thanks for everything. Would you please pick someone else? And so my question I try to remember to ask myself is, what do you say when a kid says, what did you do in the war, Daddy?
Well, David Mamet, thank you very much for joining me tonight, and hope to have you back on the radio real soon. I really got to say thank you to Glenn. I mean, these are some big shoes to fill, and I've really enjoyed being here.